Hello, everyone. You know, when you're down the pub and you inevitably end up getting bored and talking about politics? Well, that's what we are all here for. I am Peter Simpson, the man who runs the Haryan Gláeddyv channel, hosting this podcast for Wolves of Westminster with editor of Wolves of Westminster, Patrick Timms. Hello, Patrick.
Hello, sir.
And the Wolves of Westminster contributor, Simon. Hello, Simon.
Good evening, gents.
Right. Obviously, this podcast is called Down the Pub, and so this week we've all decided to have a drink. So I'm on the classic Carlsberg Pilsner because it's the cheapest thing from Tesco, which is always nice, and it's what I had in the house. What are you on, Simon?
I am on a lovely San Miguel. I've treated myself today.
Very nice, very nice. And Patrick, I believe you've got something a bit fancier than both of us plebs.
Oh, it's Oranjeboom. So this is a Dutch one, and it's 8.5%. So let's hope I don't get.
Oi.
Yeah, I know it's a bit spicy that for well, we record this on Thursdays to go out Fridays, but still. Yeah, so I think to start off, obviously, there's the almost obligatory. There's been a massive tragedy in Manchester with 4 people, I believe, in hospital and 2 have died so far from what the police have described quite early on as a terrorist attack at a synagogue on I can't remember the name of the holy day, unfortunately, but a holy day for those of the Jewish faith. And it's a tragedy, and it's a long-term issue that we all know this country has had for a while, and we still seem to be in the process of not quite dealing with properly, unfortunately. So it's very sad, but it's something that hopefully it will be dealt with because it needs to be. It's been out of hand for quite a while at this point.
I'm thinking it was Yom Kippur.
Yom Kippur, that was it. Yeah. I always remember it looked a bit like UKIPper, but
oh gosh.
Yeah, but it's not. So, but yes, obligatory. The sad news, but we'll try and keep it more upbeat from now on, I think, because we've had a big old conference with Labour, which, from what I can tell, an awful lot of people in Labour seem to think was somewhat successful. And that seems to be a front, because from what I hear from a lot of journalists, that's their public-facing analysis of it, and then every journalist I've heard has said, "Oh, I've been privately told when we're getting rid of Starmer, when we're recovering. This is a bit of a disaster." So fake it till you make it.
Can I add to that? Yeah, I mean, I've been hearing the same sorts of things as well. Basically, the mood is not good within the Labour Party, particularly amongst the backbenchers, plenty of whom didn't actually necessarily expect to get elected, and that was very much the same with the 2019 intake. If that's what you want to call it, you had that going on as well. Now, of course, at the moment, the speculation is focusing on the upcoming Tory conference and what's going to be going on there with good old Kemi. And particularly, I can tell you, having been there, basically everybody is bladdered at conference all the time. And it doesn't matter which conference you go to, whether it's Labour, Tory, or Reform. Now, Simon and I'll bring you in a moment, Simon. Simon and I were Reform because, yes, everyone is bladdered all the time. Far too much of the free views. But having been there, you have basically, for the Tory conference, you have 3 days of, trying to nige as much free booze as you can. Perhaps nige is not the proper term. In this case, but nige as much free booze as you can, and then, pro tip, soak it up, go to Conservative Friends of India because they do free curry.
Seriously. I've had it. Yeah, it's brilliant.
Yeah, seriously, everyone is just bladdered. So, but then on the 4th day, because normally it runs Tory conference from Sunday through Wednesday, and on the Wednesday, the only thing that actually happens, there are no other events. All the other events are finished. The only thing that happens is the leader's speech. Okay, and then that finishes around noon, and then you are done and everyone goes home. Now, if you want to get there, if you want to get into that, you need to have been queuing up since about 7 in the morning.
Oh wow.
And to be fair, it's for one thing, it's broadcast live. It's also broadcast within the conference venue as well, so you don't really need to be in that room. But some people, the hardline faithful, will be in there. So we will see what it's like for Kemi. I remember what it was like for Liz Truss, which was actually not. It was not. I wouldn't call it barnstorming, but it wasn't a bad speech. That one 3 years ago, but you're there. You see her coming through, especially if you're on a press pass. All of that kind of thing. But really, nothing happens on that fourth and final day in terms of events at a major party conference. But it is the major speech. It is the one that sets out, basically tells you a lot more about how she, in this case, is feeling, and then the reaction from party members that you get to that sort of sets the mood for the entire conference, despite the fact that most people have actually buggered off by then. They usually do by that point, because there's not a lot of point in being there. It is, though, it's one of those where that whole thing will be planned and built up for a long time, and this one will have been as well. So it'll be very interesting to hear what Kemi says, and I'll shut up.
Well, yeah, I mean, I've unfortunately never been to a conference. I had quite a lot of people actually messaging me saying, "Oh, we're going to be at the Reform one," and I couldn't make it. I mean, even you, Patrick, said, "Am I going to be there?" Unfortunately, I couldn't be. So I really do want to try and make the next one. But I'm hoping that, a bit like last year, they travel the country again and try and do a Welsh one, do a Northern one, do a Scottish one. But well, usually, actually, the Welsh one is further away for people in North Wales, where I live. It's quicker to get to Birmingham than, I think it was Newport last year, which a lot of people in my branch complained about because we feel a bit neglected. But that's I suppose that's comes with living in the middle of nowhere, more or less. So
yeah, I suppose.
Well, what about you, Simon?
Main thing I'm really interested in here is that for the first time, Labour, in the form of Zach Polanski's Greens, actually have their own sort of mini version of reform. So in a way, both of the main parties have got the same problem here, whereby we've got this sort of allegedly vaguely charismatic, vaguely competent person waiting in the wings, and then a different party that's sat there nipping at the heels. Now, I don't really think it's normal for Labour to be in that position. The Tories are known for their sort of regicides, but to be at a Labour conference where people are seriously saying, "Okay, so when is the party leader being removed?" I can't really think of any recent example when that's actually happened. I think we are in very, very uncharted territory.
I can't remember. What was it like with Corbyn's later years? What were those conferences like?
I can tell you that they were actually there was not a suggestion of getting rid of him, not really. Now in the Labour Party, now Kinnock, for example, that's a good. And I we were going back 30 odd years, but he operated the strategy of containment, which was, okay, fine, you have some ideas, you can democratically put them to the floor of conference, and they can be systematically voted down. And then what we've done is nobody can say that you didn't have a voice. You did have a voice. It was just pretty crap, and there we are. And now that's not there. So this is the way that the Labour Party has traditionally contained its more rebellious elements. So it'll be, it's not the way the Tory Party do it. The Tory Party tend to do it in the way of as I'm saying, is regicide. But so they're very, very different approaches. And as Simon is pointing out, you've now got this potentially this element within the Labour Party that may form a splinter group or something of some such. But let's talk further.
Well, fingers crossed for that. I suppose the difference is as well, Keir Starmer is officially the least popular Prime Minister ever.
Yeah, that was,
which is
it was kind of surprising and not unsurprising.
Yeah, well, everyone just thinks, what about Liz Truss? And then it turns out Sunak was less popular than Liz Truss, I think, because Liz Truss got deposed early enough.
Yeah, she was hated sort of briefly, and then I think the longer you stay in the job, the more hated you'll be. That's kind of full stop. But Starmer's in that bizarre predicament where actually he's screwed up so hard and been in the job for just about long enough for the hate to start sticking, if you get what I mean. Whereas with Liz Truss, most people I don't think even remember her, let's be honest.
Well, it's funny, it was mentioned to me, and then the Queen died when she was in charge. And I was like, I completely forgot
that. yeah, exactly. Yeah. It was like, it's like COVID, it's kind of a memory hole by most people.
Well, I can speak to that. I mean, yeah, you're right. I mean, in fact, the Queen died two days in, I think, to Liz Truss's premiership.
Oh, yeah.
I will say, I thought she looked very prime ministerial at the funeral. I thought she handled that bit well. Sadly, not necessarily everything else, but I thought she handled that bit well. But yes, it was one of those where I don't know, you just had, with, as Simon has been saying, with such a short time frame, it's difficult really to pin it down. But looking at the way that various different prime ministers are remembered, I mean, let's go across party now. You have Thatcher 11 years, Blair 10 years. That's a very, very long time to be prime minister.
Oh yeah, definitely. And then Brown was, well, the shortest one that I remember before Liz Truss. And then as we went through Tories like regicide, Labour it never seems to work for. But then again, they've not actually been in charge too much over the past century. And now, a little bit like the Tories, there's an entirely reasonable chance that they become a minor party, and you have Reform Lib Dems. So it's like watching a slow motion car crash. Really, that's what it's felt like the Labour Party conference was.
Going back to the 18th century, the sort of vaguely statist right wing party, and then the allegedly liberal thing opposite them. The descendants of the Whigs. I think it's quite funny that that's happened. But there's this bizarre thing I've noticed, which is that Labour have a reputation for disunity. But when push comes to shove, they will unite behind the leader because they understand that for them, at least being in power, is rare enough. And actually, as long as it's somebody vaguely acceptable, they're usually fine with it. But this time, they're really, really, a lot of the grassroots people, really agitating against Starmer. With the Tories, you've got this reputation for unity. And the minute that you are in any way, shape, or form an insider, even if you're kind of circling about, you realise that's not actually true. Everybody hates each other. I've always found that very interesting.
Yeah, which is quite funny as well because the whole year's felt like every time there's a vote from the Labour government, the backbench have been rebelling. To the point the government was completely pacified over cutting $5 billion off the welfare bill, and obviously you had the winter fuel allowance as well. Which, to be honest, I completely get why no one wants to cut it because you've got this. You can't do anything till immigration's sorted, really. Because why is billions going to that? I think every government's going to be completely pacified until that's been sorted. Every government keeps saying they're going to, and nobody trusts anyone really. In Reform, have to build some trust to some degree, but you're definitely going to roll the dice with them. That seems to be what the polls are showing anyway.
For a lot of people, next election it's not only about who you trust, but also who you think can actually handle making the tough decisions. And even in Labour, even if they think that the decisions we have to make are not necessarily what us three might think they have to make, the far left of Labour still think that fundamentally Labour right now aren't serious about making so-called tough decisions. But in their case, it's like they don't want to tax the millionaires. But I think there's a consensus in the country that the next election is about effectively choices about effectiveness of government, if that makes sense.
Yeah, because well, no, you go, Patrick.
Oh, I was going to say, I mean, there's certainly a centre when you look at history, and just to mention, Simon is doing his PGCE at the moment to teach history at a secondary school, presumably owing to some sins or other in a past life. But there we are. So when we look at history of this, yes, it is usually when we get around to this phase of the electoral cycle, and that's by which I don't mean 5 years and 5 years and 5 years or whatever it is. I mean, we get to this point where actually people. I mean, why did Labour get voted in this time? It was basically a case of saying screw the other guys. I don't think it was an election that was rooted in much of a public perception of competence. It was more a case of saying, well, they're not them. And you get some elections like that. But I think Simon's point is right that at some point, we are going to have another election where people are actually going to, are these people actually any good? Now, I remember a piece by William Atkinson in Conservative Home a few months after last year's election, and the headline, said it all, which a headline should. But the headline just said, "Do you miss us yet?" So
Yeah.
and I think his point was perhaps prescient in the sense of, this isn't going to happen yet, but it's going to happen sometime. People are going to look at this, especially employers with those NI hikes.
Oh gosh, yeah.
And all of that, I can see a lot of businesses moving towards the more sessional model, which suits me. Just hourly rate or day rate, and you send a monthly invoice. It means they don't have to contribute anything, in employer NI terms or your superannuation for your pension. They don't have to do any of that. I can see a lot of people moving that way, but now people are really starting to realize that if you just thought that you could just get some other adults in the room and everything is going to be fine. That's what this government thought. Oh, well, once we're in charge, once we're in power, we can do things much better than that last useless lot now, can't we? And then it turns out that actually they can't. So
Yeah.
we could have told you. We could have told you.
It really didn't help that every left of centre political commentator was basically saying, "Oh, the adults are back in the room." The famous tweet by the famous tweet by Otto English of "It's nice, isn't it? The quiet." I think he tweeted that 2 days after they got elected, and now everyone did post it back at him, and he got so mad he left Twitter over it. It's been a disaster, which I told everyone it would be. I even texted my brother the other day. I think I texted him a tweet from the Spectator, James Heal, where he basically made the point, coming up to this conference, Keir Starmer is the least popular PM ever, and half of Labour members want him gone. But so obviously, which my brother laughed at, and I was like, "Did you get what you voted for?" And he said, "Well, technically yes, because I got rid of the Tories." To which I made the point of, "Yeah, but things are much worse than they were under the Tories." To which he argues that, "Oh, well, it might have been worse under the Tories, though, mightn't it?" And I keep thinking, well, no, I don't think so, because they instantly folded to unions, and now the unions are still on strike and demand more. And Birmingham's still at a standstill, and there's still rubbish in the streets, which isn't necessarily a national government problem. It's a Birmingham Council problem, but nothing's been done at the root cause of that, which was a mixture of, Birmingham Council's own mistakes plus Equality Act legislation to do with equal pay for two completely different jobs. So,
how is it where you are, Simon? You're in Nottingham at the moment, aren't you?
Yeah, well, actually, speaking of this Birmingham Council thing, I have a little bit of a point to make there, which is it is a central government problem, because one of your second or third biggest city, it can't just go bankrupt without you either having to eat humble pie and give them a bailout, but also maybe just changing legislation and saying, no, they're not bound by this, the judiciary was wrong, but we haven't got the capacity to actually do that, partially because our government doesn't understand that you should do that, but partially because we're run by a lawyer. Dreadful.
Yeah, it's not. When I said that, I meant to say it's not entirely they can't do everything, because they also had the big Oracle problem where they wanted a big database upgrade or something that ended up costing about 40 billion more than they thought it would. But that kind of pales in comparison to the 100 billion they owe dinner ladies or something, because they didn't pay them as much as Dustbin Man. So
a number imagined by a joke somewhere.
I've seen extraordinary figures coming out of government that it's going to cost, either depending on what it's talking about, tens or hundreds of millions in total to upgrade some system on that. I don't know. I think this was to do with was it the visa thing, or was it something else? I'm just looking at this thinking, I've been in IT for 22 years. Give the thing to me. I'll do it.
I'll do it for free and make it work. You don't need to give Oracle 40 billion. You can just buy a license off them.
Yeah, it's more a case of contractors being paid silly amounts of at a day rate, which of course I would jump at myself these days. That's how I know. But really, it doesn't cost this much if you do it properly. And I think this is what the nation is coming to see in lots of different ways. Now, we did have the news that a former junior defence minister, Sarah Atherton, who left the Tories earlier this year, she now wants to be a Reform candidate in a Senate election in Flint Wrexham. She's put her hat in the ring. She's joined the party. We seem to be seeing more and more and more of these stories. And what do we think about that?
It's good for reform to an extent. I think my position is generally, you kind of have no choice but to trust, obviously, Nigel Zier and the top of reform's instincts on this sort of thing. The weirdest one that I've seen so far is Nadine Dorries, because Online Safety Act, that was her baby. But from what it was, but from what I understand, none of them are guaranteed candidacy. They have to earn it like everyone else, so that's not too bad. They're not guaranteed any sort of seat or anything like that as a result of that. And listening to it was quite interesting listening to the interview on the Daily Tea with Sir Jake Berry, because he apparently had a load of calls from some of his Tory friends asking, so what have you been given for this? And he kept saying, well, nothing. Now, whether that's true or not, I don't know, but I do know a lot of them put the phone down because they basically didn't believe him. I just don't understand why you'd do anything in politics without getting something back. But from what I understand, the strategy is they're only allowing people to cross the aisle, so to speak, if they've actually got something to bring. From what I understand with Nadine Dorries, you might think, well, what's she got to bring? And it's basically she got a book out and is getting media attention. She'd be good to basically give Reform some media time on that.
Well, I think particularly because of the book she's written, she might come with some, shall we say, knowledge of various things that she's providing to them. I can attest to the fact she knows probably much more than was in the book. But when you get people like there's a spectrum here of these defectors, because people like Danny Kruger, I had a lot of my sort of proper Tory boy friends messaging me on group chats going, Jesus Christ, we've lost Danny Kruger. That's absolutely dreadful. It really was. It was like if Charlie Kirk hadn't been shot a couple of days before, that would have been the Tory 9/11. It was awful, but that was overshadowed by other things. And a lot of them are coming over with a specific set of skills, which I think that's good for reform. But if they want to get serious, Nadine Dorries, really?
Yes, I'd be a little more selective.
Sort of like random 2019 like Marco Longy, who nobody remembers defected a few months ago. I think there's a real chasm of skill between some of these people, because they're never going to allow somebody like, I don't know, Suella Braverman with her Home Office experience in. I don't think they'll ever allow her in.
No, Robert Jemrick as well.
I'll do a shoe on the podcast if they do. I'm that convinced. But then they'll allow, again, people like Nadine Dorries and Marco Longy in, which is just like, what is the end game here? I don't quite understand. It makes me think that there's not really much of a strategy and they're just kind of going on a vibes basis with these things.
Possible. I mean, again, there is a spectrum of, as you say, there's a chasm of a skill gap there, or a value gap, I guess. But also bear in mind, the most valuable one by far has been Danny Kruger, and they're not even risking a by-election with him, which is quite funny, because I think he'd win a by-election anyway.
Yeah, I think he'd win it,
Yeah, but I guess they don't want to risk it. But even so, very good one. He's an MP. Everyone else who's joined, they're kind of just members, so they're just high profile. And I guess any sort of defection that's high profile. Sir Jake Berry one was really interesting, because everyone kept half the Tories called him too wet for the Tories, and the other half said that he was too much of a right-wing loony. They couldn't decide on Jake Berry, which was...
Well, I think that's the mark of an actually intelligent person when folks start to kind of dislike you for opposite reasons. I think with Danny Kruger, it kind of again, prove me if I'm wrong, because you're both a little bit older than me, but it does kind of remind me of Douglas Carswell joining UKIP in a way, trying to maybe take this thing and go, okay, it's going somewhere, let's put some meat on the bones now, let's maybe iron out a few of the wrinkles, so to speak.
Yeah, I don't really remember Carswell moving over, to be honest. That's a bit before before my time into politics. I don't know if Patrick remembers.
I do. I do.
Reformer.
I do remember, and it was yeah, it was a bit of a wild one, but it was just kind of one. Okay, it wasn't like there was a whole cohort moving over. I have met him actually. He's quite tall in person. I met him at an event that was organised at good old number 55 Tufton Street. Actually, it was a TPA event around how the House of Lords should or could or might be reformed, and he was one of the ones who came along with a proposal. But I was stood next to Lord Haywood. He's a very nice man, and he's also a noted psephologist. And so there we were, and I was just kind of hovering. You do this thing at events when you kind of hover around people who might be interesting. And Douglas comes over, and he said to Robert, is his name, Lord Haywood. He said, Robert, as a psephologist, what do you think about these, the chances of these independent group people? You remember them? And then they became Change UK, all of that.
Yeah.
And Robert said, the thing is, when you're campaigning and you're not actually one of the two major parties, it's completely different. It's a completely different experience. What Douglas was talking about was the fact that their whole campaign operation seems to be just falling apart. And what Lord Haywood was saying was, well, yeah, you'd expect that, because these people like Heidi Alexander, for example, or Anna Soubry, people like that, they're not used to not having a campaign machine behind them. And the moment they don't, they kind of turn a bit useless. That was his view.
Well, I mean, on that point, that sounds like that's what's happening within the Tory party. It sounds like CCHQ's just almost collapsed. And I can't remember the statistic, but something like 75% of their London campaign managers have just, they've gone. They can't afford them in the Tory party. So
no, they got their contracts suspended, to my knowledge, and then they tried to rehire them on a lower salary, which was already pitiful. So, and they all obviously basically said sod off.
Well, I can imagine. 70, but that's 75% of your effectiveness in London, which I mean, I don't go to London that often, but it doesn't seem exactly like a Tory stronghold. It seems like a place where you'd want campaign managers. But good lord, yeah. I mean, despite the fact they had the most donations, I mean, I don't know how the money's spent exactly, but you keep hearing that
release on there.
Yeah, well, it sounds like the Northern office might have to close down. God knows if they can keep affording the one they have in London. It still feels like they have a lot of Twitter activists as well, but I don't know if they're actually paid or not.
Well, they're going to keep. I mean, so the CCHQ office, the actual central one in London, is at number 4 Matthew Parker Street, and that's not going anywhere, as far as I can infer. That's not going anywhere. The Northern office was always a bit of a gimmick to begin with, and it only really was sustained by the fact that they were still in government. And now that they're not, I can see where that's going away, most likely. But so you do have that. But what's interesting to me is a couple weeks ago we have a conference coming up. It's rumoured within the party that Kemi has been, making a lot of changes, ostensibly, to how the staffing is operated there, and perhaps she has. But sometimes sadly, and I'm sorry to say, I've been subject to this myself. You end up getting sacked for the sake of being sacked. So you're basically getting sacked for political purposes, not because you were actually terrible at your job, but because it would look better if you didn't have your job.
Mm.
And that's what you sometimes end up with. And, I'm sure for plenty of other people who might be listening to this down the pub, might have been there.
Yeah, well. What's it? Gawain Tyler talks about this when he was Goldman sacked. If he's been sacked before, it was usually down the pub after a small chat, which isn't how Zia Yusuf did it, obviously. Though he's back on the board, so they're working together, which is funny to think about. Yeah, I mean, but to bring this back round to conference season and while we're talking about reform, well, they've come out and claim that, Labour are trying to incite violence against them, which at first I thought was a bit, you might be pushing it there, but I don't know. The more I've thought about it, the more I think, well, especially with just what's happened to Charlie Kirk, and how that all started off, and it's the point they make about the Prime Minister saying it along with 10 of his other cabinet ministers, and even then they're not consistent on it. Half the time they're saying policy is racist, but he isn't. Then they're saying actually it's Farage that's worse than a racist, but his policy isn't, because they're about to throw out a similar one. And then David Lammy's the maverick saying actually he's a neo-Nazi because he wanted to flirt with Hitler Youth.
Thing was so stupid. I don't understand it.
Well,
I have to just say, knowing. So I read about this story somewhat extensively, and the idea that a random 14-year-old from Dulwich will know what a Hitler Youth song is. First off, that's not happening. That's just ridiculous. But with the level of sort of invective level of this guy, I don't understand how they can claim that it's not an incitement to violence. You have to remember, he's not Trump. He's not coming at Starmer with the same level of vitriol that Trump comes after his opponents. They're actually if you read a lot of the things that they're saying, they're actually quite moderate in terms of what they think about Labour supporters and Keir.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, he's always been quite cordial. I mean, he even said that in his small speech. I always thought Keir Starmer was cordial and at the very least, almost pleasant. But now I'm saying no, he shouldn't even be prime minister because of the tactic they've gone along with. Because on one hand, it is very funny. They're trying to do a 2014 tactic that's never worked ever.
No, it's going to backfire spectacularly.
Well, it already has, according to the polls. They lost 3% since then, whereas Reform's gone up. And Reform's ended up with over 5,000 people joining them this week.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, it's normally during conference season, you hope if you're the party of governance, you hope that your polling will go up, and it hasn't, and it's just sort of it adds another meaning to the whole doom loop spiral phrase, doesn't it? That actually, I don't think anybody knows on their end of things how to make this actually better.
No.
And if we're talking in down the pub terms, a lot of people down the pub actually talking about, if they can be asked to talk about this kind of thing at all, is where the hell is this going? I think that's the sense in the country at the moment. That's the mood. Okay, we didn't want the Tories anymore because one, they didn't do the things they said they were going to do, and two, they've been in power for ages, and how much has actually changed? It was any good? Okay, let's give the other lot a go. That's literally, when you look at the Labour vote base, they've got a huge majority, but on a very thin base. This is like when you go to Italy and you get a proper pizza, seriously, the ones that look like sort of cardboard length, tiny ones.
Yeah, right.
That's what their voter base is actually like.
Right.
It's not, they didn't get in because people wanted them. They got in because people didn't want the Tories. Now, that is not really a very good mandate for governance. And indeed, when we look at their subsequent decisions in government, they basically thought, well, once we get in, everything will be fine because we'll sort it out. And then what they realised, and I'll point to Henry Hill actually from Conhome here as well, governance is actually quite hard, right? It is actually quite hard, and they, there is a prevailing tendency amongst the Labour tribe in general and the left also in even more general to believe that as long as they can get somewhere, then things will be fine. And what they're now finding, and the rest of the country is finding, is just because you've elected the other people, that doesn't mean anything's going to get any better anytime soon. In fact, it's actually getting worse.
Well, yeah, well, it's how I start every video, and how I've started every video from 2021. Welcome to the clown decade. Everything's going to get worse before it gets better, because effectively you've had two parties that have tried to keep a status quo in place, and it's not tenable. People don't actually want it. That was the point of Boris Johnson, and they did the opposite.
Oh God,
yeah. So now it's realigned back to, as Dominic Cummings keeps saying, it's their worst enemy. It's Nigel Farage who's back and more popular than ever.
Yeah, it is a bit poetic and theatrical, I suppose, isn't it?
Yeah.
If I was writing a film, I'd have all sorts of fun montages about that, trailers and things. But also, do you not think they've just become the Tories again? There's not actually much of a difference between what's going on now versus sort of mid to end stage Boris, where just every single week there's something else. It's the US ambassador was caught for not philandering, but associating with a known nonce. Then you've had all sorts of things about your own campaign manager Morgan Sweeney allegedly having a slush fund for your leadership campaign. So what's going to happen next week?
Yeah, well, exactly. And the funny thing is that my theory as to why, because a lot of people are saying that the cabinet's coordinated with calling Nigel Farage racist. You don't have to coordinate that. I think they've just gone to factory reset NPC mode, and I think what's actually happened. I think what's actually happened is that the comms team are working overtime to basically try and bury the Morgan McSweeney allegations. If it turns out that Morgan McSweeney did have this alleged slush fund that was used to depose of the old leader and put Starmer in charge, donated by a load of people who apparently didn't actually declare it, you're screwed. You're not going to survive your job, and Starmer needs him. So I think all comms are on deck for that. And in fact, maybe it's actually part of the comms team strategy. I'll just call Farage racist. That'll be a massive story, and it's turned into one. So maybe it is a comms strategy.
Well, in a way, it is a big story because it's the main thing anybody really remembers from that whole conference, which I think is depressing when the only thing you remember is you slagging off your opponent and then calling him a racist, and then he sends a video back and it's 2010's YouTube era call-outs.
Yeah,
but also on Morgan McSweeney, I think the reason these stories are all coming out now, because bear in mind the media knew about this a while ago. Peter Mandelson's been sacked, right?
Yeah.
Who do we know who is capable of suddenly making these things appear and disappear?
Oh, go on.
Peter Mandelson. I think somebody's gone scorched earth. I think someone's gone scorched earth.
Well, that's a very Mandelson thing to do, I suppose. It is quite funny actually. I've been watching old Top Gear, just sometimes. Yeah, I know, but I do not remember how much they had to go at Labour. Peter Mandelson comes up almost every episode with Jeremy Clarkson basically saying he should be put in stocks. So it was always amazing that he came back almost. It kind of makes sense as American ambassador because he was always there. But as it turns out with with Jeffrey Epstein, apparently,
I don't understand.
What don't you understand?
Yeah. I don't understand how. Well, we all know their story about how well vetted he was absolutely nothing.
Well,
It was just nonsense.
Just not true. Yeah.
More importantly, the fact that even in vetting, you seriously incredibly had to ask this guy. So your association with Jeffrey Epstein, and that conversation ended in something that wasn't just sorry, you're not an eligible candidate anymore. Well, I don't understand. It doesn't fit in my head.
Yeah, and everything we've heard since is, the Starmer government were warned about the fact that he probably shouldn't be in the job, and he was put in there anyway.
I think he's obviously worse than Chris Pincher, to be honest.
Oh yeah, that was an old one as well. Yeah.
He's trying to make a comeback. He's been writing to the Critic, which I found incredibly distasteful.
I didn't know he was writing that.
The thing is with these people, it it is one of those things that emphasises the fact that it really is about who you know. And some people are just viewed as one of us, one you can trust, one of the club, one of the team, one of that kind of thing. Actually, and to put it back on the other side of the coin, you know, it's like when, actually on both sides of the coin, when you had Mandy brought back, I think for the third time, but they had to do it from the Lords. But in fact, the Cameron administration did the same thing with other people, and then there was kind of like, okay, we're going to have now. Who was it? Nikki, what's her face? What's the name? Former education secretary.
That'll be Nicky Morgan, surely. Am I misremembering?
Sorry, that's right. Yeah, and so they brought her back, but they had to ennoble her first because she wasn't going to get, realistically, she wasn't going to get re-elected. So they made her a baroness and they stuck her in the cabinet. And you even then had Rishi ennobling Cameron just so he could make him foreign secretary. But then he couldn't then answer questions in the Commons, so he needed a deputy for that. And it's just like, okay, I will say, trying to be fair here, this is one of the problems with democracy and people actually need to get elected. Is that you think, look, these are the people I want around me. I just have to get over this rather thorny foothill of getting them elected. And if their primary skill set is not actually getting elected, or it is not anymore, after whatever has happened, but I still want them in the room when I'm making decisions so they can advise me and that kind of thing. Right? Fine, stick them in the Lords, and then I can get around the cabinet table anyway. It's one of those where it doesn't sound very honourable, but I can see how it happens.
It's one of those things that I will defend about our constitution to the death. Like, sort of sometimes it's just acceptable. Yeah, they're not going to get elected again, but they are very good at their job. David Cameron as a foreign secretary, he wasn't bad. He wasn't. So I don't really blame it. And to be frank with you as well, Reform are being quite open about taking that to their advantage because they're gonna be able to basically stuff the damn thing. And to be honest with you as well, it takes away from the jobs that they should be doing as an MP as well. So have some of the MPs in the cabinet, but
Well, now that's something that's very worthwhile pointing out is that and Nigel Farage said this, that they don't necessarily think they need to form a cabinet of wholly elected people.
Yeah.
And I don't think that was saying, okay, we'll make a load more people Lords.
But that is the way they do it at the moment. But I know what you're going to say.
But I think actually what they were saying was, we'll just change the arrangements such that very much like presidential style in the US, that kind of thing, that actually, we don't act, okay, whatever, we'll just we'll change the law so that we can put whoever in there because we know these are the right people. Now that's actually, I think a lot of journalists actually didn't pick up on just how profound of a statement that was. You're saying you basically want to run a presidential style government, which isn't something that happens in this country. It never has. Not for a long time anyway. And I should go back to Cromwell for that one. But
no.
The point that we are the inner circle. We know the people we want to be doing these jobs. It's a very business style way of looking at things. It's saying, okay, I want this person because I know he or she is good at doing this. I don't want to have to deal with a rather annoying hurdle of actually getting them elected, especially because competence and getting it, I've said this for a long time, I'll shut up in a second, but I've said this for a long time. the thing with politicians is their primary skill set is in getting elected. Their secondary skill set is in getting re-elected. Their tertiary skill set, if you're bloody lucky, might actually happen to involve being of some actual goddamn use once elected. And I think people like Farage, and in fairness also Tice and Yusuf, will look at that and say, yeah, this is kind of the problem.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And the other problem on top of that is, well, how do you get elected? For most people, it's just have the right coloured rosette. Maybe not most, but it certainly helped. It helped Tories in 2019. It helped Labour last year. This time round, the teal one will help.
I should add, it's not cheap standing for election.
It's be minted and then go network for a couple of years and see what happens. It does actually lock a lot of people, particularly people that might have been sort of not massively well paid, but quite influential and fundamentally good academic positions, for example, or let alone state sector people that aren't going to be with Labour, which do exist as one.
Well, and then there's I mean, so I'm going to keep quiet on where my constituency is, but let's just say the MP who was my MP for 5 years. He tried a couple of times in London and then a couple of times in the West Midlands. And then, because they don't give you any help, apparently, this is a Conservative MP, they sent him up to the Northwest, where I am, and said, go and live there. And so he had to get a flat, and to be fair to him, for a year and a half or 2 years, something like that, he worked that seat. He did. He was running coaching for disabled football players, doing swimming training at the local leisure centre, doing all that kind of thing. He's now, because he knew he wasn't going to get this seat again, he's now the MP, still an MP, a Tory MP for Battle and Bexley. So you can now. You can now find out who he is. But I would just look at it and say this is, again, it's career politics. I want to be an MP, and I'm not really that arsed about where I am. I've tried it up here, down there, then up here again, and down there. That kind of thing. He's lucky to have won that seat, but he's probably parachuted into it. But at the same time, I will say he did. He earned this seat. It wasn't just Boris and Brexit, the 2019 election. It wasn't just that. He earned this seat, but they don't help you. They really don't. They'll just tell you where to go and where to try and build up a local community reputation and stand. That's what they do. And I don't imagine it's any different in Labour. No. Okay, so
two things I'm sort of bursting to say. Number one, the extent to which you're basically like a social worker and a sort of super counsellor, it's ridiculous. Especially if you want to attract people that have experience in like foreign affairs or financial things and law and all that. It's not the same skill set. And it puts off a lot of very high achieving people, not necessarily because of the pay. I'm not going to be one of those that says MP should be paid more, because the work is so difficult, and ultimately the chances of you actually winning are pretty slim. It just doesn't look like a good investment for many people. And fundamentally, I think wanting to be an MP and being one of those people that's just like, oh, I'll be an MP for whatever party, whatever area, I think it should preclude you from being one, to be honest. I'm just being very curious about this, I know, but
well, it's what everyone says about every politician. The best ones are the ones that don't want to be the politician, but obviously the problem is that they only then come out when they're needed.
Was one of those, but he's not been very good.
In fact, the same thing was said, and I don't think necessarily correctly, but was said about Jeremy Corbyn. Who'd been
I think he wanted to be a politician.
Well, yeah, but he'd been a backbencher for 30 years. This is kind of my point now. And when Labour appointed its first shadow cabinet, not shadow cabinet, its first actual cabinet, its front bench last year, it was one of the things that was remarked upon that none of them had ever done anything like start their own business. You know,
Yeah.
the skill sets are, I won't say they're incompatible, because there are some people who can do both. There's just not many of them. So that's the situation we end up in, and now we find ourselves down the pub thinking, what the sodding hell is going on with all of this? Well, I mean, it's not that difficult to explain in some ways.
Another thing they keep saying is, criticism, none of them have started their own business. Then everyone else is saying, oh, barely any of them went to private school. Well, that's not helpful for social mobility, is it? It's not a great advert.
No.
So,
I'll be honest, the fact we live in a country where my flatmate from first year is currently the baby of the house. This man was a master's student. He's never actually had a job. I'm not really happy about the state of things. Is that if that's seriously possible in America? Don't get me wrong, it's not a perfect system. But every other senator or congressman is like some business lawyer type, at least, and they all seem fairly capable, if not perfect.
Well, isn't one of our big problems with Starmer that he's a massive lawyer type?
Well, apart from that, American lawyers are very different to British lawyers. American lawyers are very different to British lawyers.
Well,
in a good way, they're a bit more. I think they're a bit. How do I describe this?
The thing is, we do have a
sort of more real over there, basically. That's what I'd say.
We do have a bit of a trope. We have a bit of a trope, don't we, as to, because a lot of people have compared Starmer to Blair, in the sense of, oh look, North London, Islington, lawyer. Yeah. Now I was on a call, because I do pay attention across the spectrum. I was on a call with John McDonnell and quite a few other people. Yes, you see,
go on.
Yeah, I was. And he gave his, what you might call, sort of rather more grandfatherly style sort of lecture. Because the thing is, you had, after Kinnock left, you had John Smith at first in the early 90s. And John Smith then died. And we don't know what might have happened had he sort of got in, had it not been the Blair wave, as it were. But he was saying that he felt, and of course he says this from a very left-wing, very sort of socialist perspective. He said that he felt, why did Blair get voted in the first place as Labour leader? That's amongst the membership and the delegates, of course. He said he thinks, well, it's just people like, they look at people like that, and he was comparing it to Starmer. This is about 5 years ago. And he was saying there are some people who just like to tug their forelocks, as it were, to doff their cap and say, yes, you're the kind of person who looks like you're respectable, and you have this career experience behind you, and you look a lot more credible than anyone else who's standing, so I'll vote for you. Now that was his view. That was his view. Okay, so I think it's also a typically socialist way of sort of saying, but they're all just the elites and the toffs and that kind of thing. So, well, yeah, but it seems to work with the populace, doesn't it?
Yeah. I mean, thinking back to that as well, and even to the conference and commentary I've heard on it, it seems. I mean, you say, doff his cap and you look basically the best out of everyone else. The problem is he still looks the best out of everyone else. Who's actually there to replace him? It was going to be Andy Burnham, but then basically everyone said, don't do that. What are you doing, Andy? You're not even an MP. No one's going to stand down for you.
Well, we don't know about that, but Simon, do you want to lead on this bit?
Yes, I mean, just briefly, his other attempt was absolutely shambolic when he I think ran against Corbyn and got like 10% of the vote, and then said that his favourite biscuit was chips, beer, and gravy, which was like an actual quote he did on a Mumsnet interview.
Yeah, I
think people have just forgotten that this guy's not really that capable.
Well, he's quite well liked in Manchester. I do know that. And people that don't like him me, to be honest with you, I can't actually really cite anything properly, mainly because I don't live there anymore. But he's you know, I hear mixed reviews on his because he's done a bit of a TFL and national, or I guess cityized the public transport networks, so all the buses are owned by the council, and obviously the Metrolink is, and the Metrolink's always been pretty good and cheap for me. I think it's still a fiver to get to the city centre from right outside the line, right to the end of the line. So yeah, it's he is well liked there, and I think if he did stand somewhere in Manchester, Reform would have quite a fight on their hands, because obviously pretty much everywhere in Manchester is either very close or it's pretty much going to be Reform. But even in one of those Reform leaning seats from the polls, he is still probably going to do quite well, simply for the fact that it's Andy Burnham, and obviously he's on. Well, he's to the left of the party now because, as everyone says, he used to be a Blairite, then he was fully behind Corbyn, and he basically just follows the leader, which is probably quite good for politicians to some degree, but it does make him look incredibly fake, and so.
Well, so I mean, I suppose this comes back to a point I've made before that politics is essentially the intersection of people and power. It's who's got it, who wants it, and who's trying to get it, and really is the route to that. So I mean, we opened earlier, I think, by saying we were talking about the defection of Sarah Atherton. Yeah, she's decided that Reform is the best vehicle for her to either regain or retain a seat. Well, yeah, people do this, so none of us should really be surprised about that. That is what happens, and so people will, we're talking about Reform's shifting positions, Labour's shifting positions, the Tories shifting positions. I mean, this is what people do. A polite way of describing that is to say that they're just trying to read the room and think but why are they doing that? They're not doing that in the national interest. They're doing that because they think that this is the best route for them to stay in power. So people look for the best route for themselves. You can't even necessarily blame them, because the reality is, now the Greens know this, they do. You can be in power as much. Sorry, you can be elected as much as you like, but if you're not going to be able to form a majority government, you can believe whatever you like, as lovely as it might be, but it's not going to happen.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's probably part of the reason Zach Polanski's gone where he's gone. I mean, he's certainly got power, but he was a Lib Dem 40 years ago. He was doing karaoke on stage or something at a Lib Dem conference, singing with everyone else. Yeah,
they were. I think there are images of them together at the Lib Dem conference at one point, way back when. It's very bizarre.
Yeah, I mean, the Greens seem to be a party for the maddest socialist going, but having said that, Jeremy Corbyn's not joined them, mainly because he's a Labour man till he dies, despite your party springing up. Zara Sultana's not joined them for some reason. I can't quite tell with her, because she's just been kicked out of your party because it's a sexist boys' club, apparently.
But what you were saying, there's no coherence between the views between some of these MPs on the far left, Patrick. I mean, they've had, so before your party had the whole Schrodinger's MP thing with Scotland, they had a whole disagreement with Adnan Hussein about his stance on trans people. It's just there is no coherence there. You say the right are disunited. Actually, I think the left's doing much worse in that aspect.
Oh yeah, I've seen it on both sides. To be honest, seen it on both sides, mate. It's one of those where the coalition is always quite loose, and that's also why you only end up with getting people together who you sort of hate each other less than the other lot, or that kind of thing. That's how you keep people together in politics, and this is why it becomes so tribal. And that's exactly what it is. Basically, it's an us and them thing. Now, decades ago, when you had, for example, the Cold War, there was, there was an understanding that you were either with the West or you're with the East, i.e. basically Russia, and all of that kind of thing. That did at least keep things simple for people. It's less simple now, but when we look at change, we always have to look at when things have changed, and they have. We also have to look at what hasn't changed. And what has definitely not changed is that human beings are tribal.
Oh, yeah.
And that will always be reflected in politics.
Yeah, well,
because politics is basically the human condition on steroids, as I said before.
Oh, yeah. Well, I call it war by other means as well. That's especially true in geopolitics. I mean, speaking of tribalism and having no coherency, have either of you seen that Rupert Lowe came out for indefinite leave to remain on Julia Hartley-Brewer?
I don't know what he's saying anymore, to be honest.
Well, I think it's just basic Farage derangement syndrome. I think Farage is in favour of something, but the whole Rupert Lowe's whole brand is I'm Mr. the Port the Mall man, and then he's there saying, "Oh, they shouldn't," but Farage shouldn't get rid of ILR. It's like, what? Sorry, but everyone supports
people's spouses, and it's just like, right, Rupert. What's going on? Are you just trying to basically say whatever Farage is? It's a little bit strange because he's gone from being Ian Foote from Little Britain to talking about many people have got their Eastern European spouses here. It's incoherent. Let's be honest. His office is basically run by the Legacy-Seaters, so that makes it even stranger that somebody had to approve that message.
Well, I mean, from what I understand, Rupert Lowe basically just goes off to do his constituency work, and I kind of just has to guess what the topic of the day is and what he has to say. And he's like, "Oh, Farage said this, I'll just go against it." Which, if that's what he wants to do, that's fine. But as you say, it's definitely an office that's run by other people, along with Restore, along with the Rape Gang Inquiry, which I on my channel this is published on my channel as well. But I did a whole video on why they're just falling apart and have basically turned into like.
Not the Rape Gang Inquiry was a thing, to be honest.
Well, there's loads of people on Twitter who've said basically they were just treated awfully, basically got re-traumatized, and then were blocked by Sammy Woodhouse, who's supposed to be running it. No one's covering that though. No one's covered that. No one. So because Rupert Lowe's irrelevant to the mainstream, and all the alternative media people are on his side, apart from me. So it's. I put it on my shoulders. But I just found it very funny that Rupert Lowe, Mr. I'm surrounded by people that want them all to go, is now in favour of ILR, which no one else is. Not even Labour in favour of it at this point.
Yeah, I think most Tories actually would be in favour of reforming ILR, but they're all kind of butthurt now that Farage has said it.
Yeah.
And it won't be acceptable to voice that position for a bit.
Well, this is the thing. Sometimes we go against something not because we're actually opposed to the principle of it, but because we're opposed to the proposed practice of it. So I'm reminded of, and I need the name and I can't find it, and that's what happens when you have a fungus eating your brain. Excuse me. Who was it? Tory MP, quite an how do I put this politely? A more venerable gentleman who did the thing that you can do in the Commons, where you can just shout out and say, object to the upskirting bill. And oh God, he's going to find it now, isn't he? Doesn't matter. But so, and then he was vilified in the media for, so he thinks upskirting is perfectly fine, does it? No, that wasn't what he was doing.
Yeah.
What he was doing was, because what they were trying to do was ram it through the Commons without much in the way of debate. And what he was doing is saying, no, if we're going to do this thing, we're going to do it properly. We're going to have a proper debate, just as we should. That doesn't mean he's pro-upskirting. It just means he had identified, and I think quite correctly, as a most experienced member of Parliament, that this is not actually. You can't just assume that something is automatically right, even though I'm sure all three of us would agree. That upskirting is
controversial view. I think upskirting's bad. Hence, it was already illegal.
Yeah, but anyway. Might get cancelled for this one, boys.
You want, sorry?
You might get cancelled
for this opinion.
for being against upskirting. Yeah.
Well, it's just one of those. It's sort of like, it's not so much he was against it. It's more just a case of saying we need to go through proper process. It's also why I don't like sites like the one like they work for you dot whatever it is, where you get individual people's voting records, but then they categorize them in their own way.
Yeah.
In their own way. So has voted 68% of the time against LGBT rights issues and that kind of thing. So yes, but you don't know why they did, and indeed, for example, I mean, I'm perfectly pro LGBT. I mean, I'm happy that, for example, gay marriage is legal in this country now, as it is in the Netherlands and Canada and various other places. But I was skeptical. I know from past experience of other people who were skeptical about the way in which it was brought in. And it's quite funny. I remember watching the coverage from this at the time. That the thing is, so with straight marriage, you can have the marriage annulled on the grounds that it was never consummated. You can't actually do that with gay marriage.
No, I didn't know that.
Well, and well, you couldn't at the time anyway. I don't know if that's changed since, but you can't. And I remember, of all people, it was Charlotte Church hosting "Have I Got News for You" when this was going on at the time, and her, I think, pretty obviously scripted line, but well, I've been to plenty of gay nightclubs, and I can assure you that's not going to be a problem. which is fair enough, but at the same time, it's like the way it was brought in, I don't think was the best. And sometimes people object on the grounds not because they actually disagree with the principle, but simply because they're saying this: if we're going to do this thing, guys, this is not the right way to do it.
Yeah.
And the media often don't understand this, and I think a lot of other people who might be down the pub might take the same view, say, oh, he objected to this. Yeah, he did, but not because he objected to the principle, simply because he thought it ought to have been done a hell of a lot better.
Yeah. Well, the classic example of this is the Patriot Act over in America. Oh, you're against the Patriot Act. What, are you not a patriot? And it's happening now with reforming the Human Rights Act. Oh, look at all these human rights they'll get rid of. Yeah, we only had human rights from 1998. Yeah, before 1998, torture was totally legal in the UK. That's what that means.
Yeah. Well, right now, I think a more pertinent example as well is the assisted dying bill. I'm all in favour of assisted dying, but not that particular bill.
Fair enough. I mean, I'm not, and I hope that bill gets shot down. But I think we're going to end up having it.
I also do. It's crap.
Well, fair enough then. I mean, I'm Catholic, so I'm against it on religious grounds anyway. Well, I'm
my position tends to be that, as we found out earlier this year, I don't need an act of parliament to stop me from dying. So that
Well, there you go. Well done. Well,
no, as it turns out, that is the case. But even if it would, I mean, like I say, if you want to do that, you can go somewhere where it is legal to do it. Well, so there is an argument for saying, why do we need it legalized here? In principle, I'm not actually against it, but at the same time, you sort of think, do we need to do this? And certainly the way that it's been implemented through a private member's bill, I don't think, and then ran through Parliament, I don't really think that is the right way to do it. With that said, if I were an MP, I can tell you exactly the first thing I would do in terms of trying to implement legislation through a private member's bill, and that would be to sort out this silly issue that you can't be registered with more than one GP practice at once.
That's your pet hate, isn't it? Yeah, understandably.
Because it directly affects me, but that's the sort of thing that private members' bills should be used for. They probably shouldn't be used to make wide-ranging and quite sweeping. Changes to things.
That's got to be in a manifesto. Has to be. So, but this is where we're at. Anyway, unless there's anything else to add, I think we will leave it there. It's been a good pub chat. Yeah, so I'd like to thank Patrick, Timms, and Simon for coming along.
Well, we'd always come for a pub with you, for a pint with you, mate.
Well, exactly.
Absolutely.
Well,
Thank you very much.
Well, hopefully one day soon we'll be doing that in real life. So, with that, I would like to thank you all very much for listening, and until next time, this was Peter Simpson, and goodbye.